if we studied every cross-reference and everything that pertains to this eschatological study. What does eschatological study mean?
Study of future things.
Study of the last things. I wrote it up here in Greek, and I said, well, they won't know how to read that anyways, most of them, so I put eschatai hemerai. The last days is what it's talking about, and Jacob uses that very term. All right, now let's go back and see if we can dig out some things here. This is probably, if you wanted to teach the book of Revelation, you probably ought to start right here.
Yeah.
In this chapter. Go back to chapter 48 and let's look at the end of this. We have Ephraim and Manasseh, and Jacob crosses his hands when he's blessing them and blesses the younger over the older. Why? What is the law? That is a theological law in Scripture. It's what we call the rejection of the firstborn. Now, how would you apply the rejection of the firstborn to your life? How would you apply it to your life? The rejection of the firstborn.
We're born with a sin nature.
You're born with a nature of sin in you, Adam's sin in you, and you will not get to heaven under that curse. All right? Unless you die before the age of accountability. All right? You won't receive heaven in that state. Your first birth is rejected because the first birth is of the earth. Your second birth, Jesus told Nicodemus, and he knew what the term being born again is, because they had been teaching that for many, many years. Every proselyte had to be born again when he became a citizen of Israel. All right? He had to totally divorce himself from his old national identity and align himself with the nation of Israel as a proselyte. So Nicodemus had taught and baptized many proselytes. Okay? But he said you must be born again. The word born again also means born from above. Ama. Ama means what? Up or above. All right? Born from above. So here we have between Ephraim and Manasseh, and we're going to see it over and over again. That law of the rejection of the firstborn is solid in concrete and written in stone in the Bible because it pertains to us. Our first nature is also rejected by God.
The first
First
born
birth.
one was a murderer.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, Ephraim and Manasseh. Now, why was Ephraim put over all?
The heir?
He was going to be the heir. All right, but he was the second born, wasn't he? Later on in eschatology, in many, many years later, how would Ephraim be blessed above the others? What happened? In the northern 10 tribes, that this would be the head of those 10 tribes, which would be the greater, wouldn't it? All right? Later on, we'd see that. And
But they were apostate.
yeah, but they were apostate. But still, there would be 10 tribes and 2 tribes. So he would be over the greater. All right? Now, go down to verse number 22, and let's look at that. Let's try to make sense out of this. All right? Genesis 48 and verse 22. Who's got it? Brother Mike, are you there?
And I give you one portion more than your brothers, which I took from the hand of the Amorite with my sword and my bow.
Who's speaking? Biblical interpretation. Who's speaking? Jacob. Who's he speaking to? Ephraim and Manasseh. Now, when Jacob was in the land of Canaan, did he conquer any land? Did he take anything? Did he take anything? Did he let's read it again. Brother David, you read that.
Moreover, I have given to thee one portion above thy brethren, which I took out of the hands of the Amorite with my sword and with my bow.
Who's speaking? Jacob.
He took it from
Who is
Amorite.
speaking? Huh?
He took it.
No, he didn't take
He
it.
didn't take it.
No, he didn't take it.
He purchased
Who purchased it? Abraham purchased Hebron, basically. All right? The land, he said, I took with my sword and my bow. How did he do this? Brother Wally, you know?
Well, are you talking about conquering the land? As
Yeah,
Moses-
I'm talking
Moses
about...
came when Joshua took over?
No. This is prophetic here, and he speaks in future perfect.
Okay.
This is what we call future perfect in Hebrew. You need to write this down, because this is real important. If you got notes, write this down. This is future perfect. He speaks of this as it already happened, but this is yet many hundreds of years in the future. But when you have children, 50 years from now, 100 years from now, 200 years, 300 years from now, Brother Bill, do you think you'll still have female descendants?
My name ends here.
But will you have the female descendants? You think so? All right, probably. All right? They may not even remember you. All right?
They may not want you.
But a lot of times they don't. How many of you can trace your family back 10 generations and know who they were?
Not
Quite.
not
A little bit rough, isn't it? You won't even know who they are.
About
But you know what? You are...
1700.
Huh?
Down to 1700.
1700. Okay. Most of us cannot trace ourselves back there. But somebody was back there, weren't they? Now look, you go back about 500 or 600 years now, Jacob is speaking in future perfect, as if Joshua and Caleb went into that land with those others and conquered that land with a sword. Who he's talking about here is David. David. Who was the man that controlled more land than all the others? By the sword. Who was that?
No, David, yeah.
All right. And it was Jacob's descendant, wasn't it? Jacob, brother David.
Now, in English, it doesn't give us a clue about future perfect, but in the Hebrew text,
It's
does it?
future perfect. It is as if it was already, he speaks as if it has already happened. And it's hundreds of years down the line. He didn't do it, but his descendants would do it, and because they were under the covenant of God. Because they were under God's covenant with Abraham, it was he that did it. Now, Brother Wally, you say you trace yours back to about 1700. You can go back to 1500, 1400, and they were there. Because you're here.
Yeah.
All right? And you are a product of them.
Sure.
You are. We all are. How many of you can trace your people back to 1500? Anybody? All right. There's two of them here. All right? Some of you can trace your people back that far. But no matter what, you can trace yourself 100 generations. Because they came. And you lived here. And you're a product of what your ancestors were. In some way. He's looking ahead, and this is a purely prophetic. This is future perfect in Hebrew. Future, it is. He speaks of it hundreds of years in the future as if it already happened. Because I'm going to tell you something, God's Word is sure. I hope that I can bring out to you some of the things that are in these verses, these next few verses. All right, in chapter 49 now, chapter 49. Kathy, you want to read this one? Irma? Anybody? What? No? I can't get a... I know. Anna. 49 and verse 1. I'm going to get one girl involved in here.
Then Jacob called together all his sons and said, "Gather around me, and I will tell you what will happen to each of you in the days to come."
All right. The days could come in the Greek Septuagint is eschatai hemeres. All right. In the last days. Okay. In the last days. Now, how future? How future was this last verse, 22? It would take place also in David's reign, in Solomon's reign, and I guarantee you it's going to take place right here. Right there. At the end of the church age. And at the end of the tribulation period. Because who is the great Messiah that is going to come back on the white horse? All right, the descendant of these tribes. All right, he's going to come back and bring it into the millennial reign. That goes all the way back in the last days. So here we are jumping. This is the whole history of the nation of Israel right here. The whole history of that nation. What will happen in the last days? Verse number 2. Verse number 2. Randall, have you got that?
Gather together and hear, O sons of Jacob, and listen to Israel your father.
Sons of Jacob. Now he uses his personal name that he was given, and then he uses his title. All right? His personal name and then his title. I want to tell you this also, because I think I skipped over. Esau's wives, if you study them in the scriptures, you'll find out that it gives different names for them. Many times, like the Indian people here in America, you had a baby name, and then when then you had a grown-up name, and that you might have done something special in your life, and then you had a grown-up name. How many of you ever heard of a man afraid of his horses? Huh?
What is it?
Man afraid of his horses. I'm related to him. Man afraid of his horses. Now you'd say, well, that's a kind of a weird name. Man afraid of his horses. He must not have been a good horseman or something. That's what you think. But that's not what it said in the original language. It says the man whose enemies are afraid to even see his horses before they see sight of him. Because he painted his horses in a special way. All right? There was another Indian in my family called Two Strikes. Two Strikes. Very long time ago, Two Strikes. And he had a baby name, and then he had a name Two Strikes. And he had a bowl made out of elk horns. You ever seen an elk run through the forest? Their horns are pliable. When the elk run through they got great big wide racks. And when they run through the forest, they hit those trees, those horns just fold back. Well, the Indians would take those horns and they'd make bows out of them, so the strongest bows would be made out of an elk horn. Well, Two Strikes had one of these elk horn bows, and that was so strong, and he was such a strong man that he rode up beside a buffalo and shot an arrow all the way through one buffalo and killed the buffalo on the other side with the same arrow. So they called it Two Strikes. All right? Two Strikes. Crazy Horse. Crazy Horse was another one of my relatives. Crazy Horse. That's quite a name, isn't it? Crazy Horse. He had a dream one time, he had a vision, and he saw his horses dancing in the vision. He saw his horses dancing in the vision, so they called him Crazy Horse, or Dancing Horse. All right. These are names. Well, as you see this in history, many times, like even Esau's family, and back in those days, they would change the name of a king or whatever because some event that happened. And a woman, when she got married, her name was changed, like today. All right? She left her old name and she had a new name. And then what does the book of Revelation talk about those that he wrote? I write on them a what? A new name. All right? So God gave Abram a new name to Abraham. He gave Jacob a new name, which was Israel, Prince of God, or Warrior of God. We see this. Gather together and hear, O sons of Jacob, and listen to Israel your father. He says, listen to the covenant man. The covenant man of God that God made covenant with. Number 3, here we have another rejection of the firstborn. Brother Lee, number 3.
Reuben, you are my firstborn, my might and the beginning of my strength, the excellency of dignity and the excellency of power.
All right, go on.
Unstable as water, you shall not excel, because you went up to your father's bed. Then you defiled it. He went up to my couch.
All right. Boy, this was the one. This was supposed to be the heir. Here we have the rejection of the firstborn again. The rejection of the firstborn again. Reuben, you were my firstborn. You were my heir. If you want to go back to Genesis 35 and verse 22 and 1 Chronicles 5, 1 and 2. Go to 1 Chronicles 5, 1 and 2, somebody. We got to get this just a little bit.
First Chronicles 5.
1 and 2. Her First Chronicles 5, 1 and 2. First Chronicles 5, 1 and 2. Let's see what happens here. First, who's got it? Brother Rand.
Now the sons of Reuben, the firstborn of Israel, for he was the firstborn, but because he defiled his father's bed, his birthright was given to the sons of Joseph, the son of Israel, so that he is not enrolled in the genealogy according to the birthright.
All right. Here we have the rejection of the firstborn. How does it apply to you? You must be born again. Still, you must be born again. So he forfeited his birthright when he did what he did. Okay? He forfeited his birthright. And who was put in his place?
Judah.
Ephraim and Manasseh, the sons of Joseph. All right? Ephraim and Manasseh, the sons of Joseph. All right, Brother Wally. Number 5. 49 and verse 5. Genesis 49 and verse 5.
Simon and Levi are brethren. Instruments of cruelty are in their habitations. O my soul, come not thou into their secret, unto their assembly. Mine honor, be not thou united. For in their anger they slew a man, and in their self-will they hamstrung oxen.
All right, let's look at this just a little bit. All right, their swords were implements of violence and cruelty. Okay? What happened here? Remember, they had a sister. Her name was what?
Dinah.
Dinah, which is the feminine name of what? Dan. Okay, we have Dinah. And what does that mean? What's the name Dan mean?
Something about idols.
Come on, Dan. What's Dan mean? Huh? Judge. All right, judge. Judgment. Judgment. Do you realize that when he named that daughter, that was a prophetic name because judgment would come upon the man that she cohabited with and the people. He said because of in their anger they slew mankind. They slew mankind. Not only mankind, but what had taken place here. Remember what took place?
Yeah.
What?
Well, they wanted to marry Dinah. They said, if you get circumcised, we'll let you. And after they got sore, they killed a bunch.
All right, so they were covenanted into the covenant with Abraham's covenant God. They were circumcised. And they were grafted into the covenant. And here we have a type of the Gentiles of us being grafted in. And what did these wicked boys do? After they were sore from being circumcised and they couldn't hardly walk, they attacked them and murdered all of them. And they murdered their women and children like a bunch of heathens. They murdered their women and children and took their animals just like they were some heathen nation. Is what they did. They acted like heathens. So what happens? He said, and you lame the oxen. You hamstrung oxen. Now, a long time ago on the cattle drives, remember the longhorn cattle in Texas and Kansas and all back through there? You know, they brought these cattle in and they took the place of the buffalo and they had a lot of wild cattle and they started gathering them up for about 10 or 15, 20 years. They gathered up all these thousands and thousands of wild cattle, and the Texas longhorn, they were a wild cow, and they started on cattle drives with them. One of the things that they do in the cattle drive, they get the lead cow, bull out there, or cow, and it would they'd have a lot of stampedes with them. So what they'd do is they'd hamstring them, or they'd cut the kneecaps in them so when they started to run, they'd fall. They lamed them. That was a cruel way, but they were going to eat them at the end of the drive anyway, so they didn't care, keep them from running. Just do that to them. They lamed oxen. They cruelly lamed oxen. Cursed be their anger, for it is fierce. Cursed be their anger. Did old Jacob forget it? What happened? He said, you have made me stink in the nostrils of these people in this land. You acted like a bunch of heathens, boy. And their wrath, for it is cruel. I will disperse them in Jacob. What does that mean? I will disperse them in Jacob. They won't receive any inheritance. They will not receive any inheritance. Now who is this? This is Simeon and Levi, or Simon and Levi. The Simeon, they would be absorbed into Judah's inheritance. They would just have pieces of it. How about Levi? What inheritance did Levi have?
Didn't have any because it was a priestly tribe.
They didn't have any at all. And this tells us something. This is a beautiful thing also. You know, the priestly tribe. The priestly tribe were those cruel guys. Just think about it. That God can take a rat and make him a preacher.
No wonder.
God can.
No wonder they needed a new covenant.
Yeah. Just think about that. They did not, the Levites did not have any inheritance, and Simeon would not either. They would be dispersed among their people. All right? And scatter them in Israel. Number 8 now. Number 8. Brother Lee Kustra. Number 8. 49 and verse 8.
Judah, you are he whom your brothers shall praise. Your hand shall be on the neck of your enemies. Your father's children shall bow down before you.
All right. Now, what in the world is it talking about here? We're talking about Judah now. Judah. All right. Remember what happened to Judah? What happened to Judah over there in the land of Canaan? Why did God have to get Judah out of the land? He was marrying these wild women. He had 2 sons that God cut off, didn't he? Why did he move them into Egypt? So he could protect their genealogy. Because God had plans for Judah. All right? He had plans for Judah. Number 9, Brother Wally. Are you over there?
Yep. Judah is a lion's whelp.
All right.
From the prey, my son, thou art gone up. He stooped down, he crouched as a lion, as an old lion. Who shall rouse him up?
All right. Who's going to dare to rouse up a lion? Have you ever heard of the old term of let sleeping dogs lie? I sold a horse one time, a long time ago. It was a little horse. I called him Skeeter. And I had bought that horse for $15 for a horse and a saddle and all and bridle and everything else. There was a reason for that. That horse had been so mistreated that you couldn't get near him. He'd eat you alive. He was a beautiful little Palomino Shetland pony, beautifully. And when I went out there and took him out of the pen, I had to carry a whip to whip him off of me because he was so bad. Boy, he was bad. He'd just tear you up. They were out, grown people were out there getting on that horse with spurs and spurring him and riding him and bucking him out. And that's all they did with that horse. They just mistreated him something terrible. I had him eating out of my hand. He'd jump up on a log or barrel, and he'd turn and do little tricks, and was a great little driving horse. And I took him out here out on the Roselle Highway someplace, and I sold him and a cart that I had for him, and they bought him from me. I think I got about $400 for him at that time. But just totally changed his little nature. He was a wonderful, any baby could fool around him then. I went out there. When I delivered it, the guy said, I won't be there, but just put him in this corral, and he paid me for the horse, and I went out there, and there was a dog laying asleep over there. I'll never forget this. There's a dog laying asleep over there, David.
That sleeping dog's line.
Yeah. And I didn't bother that dog. And that dog just sat there, and he woke up, and he just watched me. Just watching me. I said, boy, this is a bad dog. Never barked, nothing. When I got ready to leave, I had to give me a whoop to keep him off of me. Because that dog was ready to eat me alive. Let sleeping dogs lie, kind of like sleeping lions. Just walk off and leave them be. Don't bother them. Just leave them be. All right? like a sleeping lion. Don't wake him. Leave him alone. All right? Let's go on down to number 10. This is beautiful. Number 10. Brother David, that David right there. David Osh.
The scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor a lawgiver from between his feet until Shiloh comes, and to him shall be the obedience of the people.
All right. Now let's look at this one. What in the world is this talking about, Brother Wally?
Well, it talks about the fact that Judah would be the one through whom Jesus would come.
Uh-huh. All right.
And that'd be his heirs.
All right. Now let's look at it. The scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet until Shiloh comes. What is Shiloh?
Agreement of peace.
Huh?
Agreement of peace.
All right, Shiloh. What is it? So Shiloh comes. What is this talking about?
Oh, Shiloh is
Shiloh is who?
the Savior.
The Savior, the Messiah, HaMashiach. Joshua HaMashiach, exactly. All right. Until Shiloh comes, the scepter shall not depart from between the feet of the ruler. Now, what it's talking about is Abraham had a staff. Did you know that? Abraham had a staff. All of those people had a staff, and a lot of times written on that staff was a history of their families. Did you know that? The genealogy was written on that staff. And telling who they were, and when they would sit on their throne, they would put that staff between their feet. And they would rule with that staff, that scepter, or that rod. All right? And they would pass it down to their son, and their son, and their son, and their son, because it was the way it was supposed to be passed down, because this was the right of the heirs, okay? Now, Esau's descendant wasn't supposed to be on the throne of Israel when Jesus came to this earth, was it? Okay? Esau's descendant was on there, which was Herod. He was an imposter, the toad squatting on the throne of Israel, when the real descendant of Judah should have been there. But he was alive, wasn't he? Who was he? Joseph. He was alive. He wasn't ruling, but he was there. Okay, I want you to understand that. That man was there. And who was the rightful heir to the throne? Joseph was, but Jesus was, because he was the firstborn, even though he wasn't the firstborn. He was the firstborn of God. All right? The scepter shall not depart from Judah, for the ruler's staff from between his feet until Shiloh come. 7 years after Jesus was born, Israel lost the right to execute criminals. The Roman government took that away from them. 7 years after Jesus was born. Even when Israel was carried off into captivity, there were still children of Israel. When they were carried off into captivity, they began the synagogue worship in different places. Israel was still Israel, even though they didn't even have their own language. What language were they speaking when they had the synagogue?
Greek.
They were speaking Koine Greek. All right. When they were gathered back into the land, when they came back into the land of Israel, they were a nation, weren't they? All right. The scepter of Judah would not depart until Messiah come. Israel was a nation even under the Roman Empire. But what happened when their king rode into Jerusalem on the donkey? At that moment they accepted him,
They crucified him.
but they crucified their king. What did Pilate say to the leaders of Israel? The leaders, the Supreme Court of Israel was before Pilate, Pontius Pilate.
Found no fault.
And he said, "What shall I do with your king? What shall I do with your king?" And they said, "What? Crucify him, crucify him." And they kept on saying it in perfect tense. They just kept on mumbling and grumbling and saying, "Crucify him, crucify him, crucify him, crucify him," over and over again. And Pilate's letter says that their feet stomping and their voices screaming was shaking the whole Praetorian Castle. And he finally gave in. 5 times he denounced them and pronounced him innocent. And they called for the death of their Messiah and their king. When they did that, the scepter departed from Judah. They would no longer even exist as a nation until Escate and Meros, the last days. And that's how we know the last days. We're living in the last days because God is calling Israel back. All right.
Actually, they were not in charge at that time of the nation. They were in charge maybe of the religious system.
They still had a religion. They still had a Supreme Court, which was the Sanhedrin.
Yeah.
They were still operating, but they were operating as subsidiaries under the Roman Empire. But the Roman Empire, like the Greek Empire, allowed people to rule themselves, basically. But they had lost the right of capital punishment 7 years after Jesus was born. All right. Now, let's go on until Shiloh comes. Where are we here? Brother Floyd. Brother Floyd.
Binding his coat to the vine, and his son's coat to the choice vine. He washes his garments in wine.
Okay, go back up to verse number 10.
The scepter shall not depart from Judea, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet, until he comes to whom it belongs, and to him shall be the obedience of the people. Binding his coat to the vine, and his ass's coat to the choice vine, he washes his garments in wine.
All right, let's look at this. This is talking about the end times. It's talking about when Jesus rode into Jerusalem on the donkey. He said he ties his donkey to the vine, all right, to the fruitful place. Jesus rode into Jerusalem on a donkey, didn't he? Even the foal of a donkey, it says. And the donkey's coat to the choice vine, and he washes his garments in wine. Do you wash your garments in wine? Huh? If you get wine on your white, if you're out of wine bibber out there in some of these fancy restaurants, and you spill wine on your white shirt, what happens? It is stained. So would you wash your clothes in wine? What in the world is it talking about? Huh? Oh. What's Jesus going to do? His vesture is going to be so full of blood, it's going to be baptized in blood when?
At his crucifixion.
Not so much the crucifixion. He was crucified. Yes, his blood was spilled.
Gethsemane?
But this is talking about the judgment in the book of Revelation, where he goes out and he threshes the judgment. And all of it says it's like the grapes, the wine grapes. And his vesture is going to be dipped in blood. Basically, his clothes are going to be splattered with the blood of his enemies.
What's the reference, scriptural reference?
Revelation, I think it was the 5th chapter. All right? Revelation, the 5th chapter, I believe. If I gave you all these, we would never get anywhere. It says his eyes are red from wine. Now, a wino, he wakes up in the morning and his eyes are all bloodshot. Okay? Everywhere. I've seen a lot of winos. See, I was around a lot of them when I was growing up. And drunk Indians. Yeah. And when they wake up in the morning, their eyes would just be totally bloodshot. But what it's talking about here is using figures of speech. His eyes are red, like a wino's. Why are they red? Because of the blood that was splattered on him from his enemies. He said, in his teeth, white from milk. Whiter than milk is what it literally says. Whiter than milk. My wife used to tell me that my teeth were whiter than hers. I said, it just looks that way because I am so dark that my teeth look whiter. All right? And my eyeballs look whiter because I'm darker. And that's what it's talking about. There's going to be so much blood on his garments that his teeth look white. Whiter. All right? Whiter. And this is the Messiah. It's talking about the judgment in the last days. Or what's going to have to take place over here. Right here.
Battle of Armageddon.
Yeah. The judgment, when he comes down and saves Israel.
That's when he's going to slay them in the 19th chapter.
That's right.
Of Luke.
All right. Not only that, what's God going to do to false religion at that time? How many churches did Jesus found? Who knows? One. How many churches are there in the world today? Many. Every flavor and denomination of things that you can have. And you know what? One of the greatest problems we have is what is salvation? Half of the world baptizes for salvation. You're baptized for salvation. You work your way into heaven, but we're saved by what? We're saved by grace. We're saved by turning to the Lord in repentance. That's real important now. You have to get under the conviction of the Holy Spirit of God, and you have to repent, and then you have to call upon the Lord, and He does the saving. There's 90% of Christendom. Christendom doesn't teach that. Christendom. All right? They name the name of Christ, but they don't apply His blood to them. And you know what's going to exist in the tribulation period? There's going to be plenty of churches. Well, after the rapture takes place, the churches are still going to be populated with people, with lost people. And what is the problem with the cults and isms out there?
They don't believe that Jesus is very God.
That's right. They don't believe that Jesus is God. And Jesus told Israel, He said, you won't see me again until you say, blessed and holy is He that came in the name of the Lord. All right? Let's go on a little further now. Zebulun shall dwell at the seashore. All right? And he shall be a haven for ships. And his flank shall be toward Sidon. In other words, Tyre and Sidon, he will be down in that area, there on the Mediterranean area. He will be dwell by the seashore. I'll tell you what, this has been hot, hasn't it, the last 2 days? I bet it is cool over there in Pismo Beach. No, it's not cool. Hot over there too?
105.
105. Oh boy, that's unbelievable. That's better than 110 and 15 around over here though still. The seashore, you have the sea breezes. It cools off at night at least.
At least you can get the ocean.
Yeah, you can go jump in the creek or the ocean or something, can't you? Issachar is a strong donkey. This is quite a verse here. Issachar is a beast of burden. Now, every family has a slave. Every family has a slave. Always. They do. Everybody. Every family has a person that's a servant in it. My grandmother's family, my grandmother was a servant to all of them. They had like 12 kids. My grandmother was a servant to all of them. She always took care of all of those others. She did all the work, she did all the cooking, she did all the cleaning, she did all of it. That's just the way it was. And your family, are you looking at your wife over there? A lot of mamas are the servants of the family. A lot of them are. Sometimes the daddy is. My boys grew up with me doing all the cooking and all the cleaning and everything. They did. You know who cooks and cleans in their houses? They do. Because they saw Daddy. And they repeated it. There are people in every family that are servants. And that's what God is saying right here through Jacob. He said, Issachar shall be the servant of the others. When my grandmother died, all of her family mourned greatly. They didn't think anything of it. But when she was gone, boy, you never miss the well. You never miss the water until the well runs dry, you know. Then they had so much respect for all, and they remembered all the things that they had done. Issachar is a strong donkey, lying down between sheepfolds. When he saw that a resting place was good and that the land was pleasant, he bowed his shoulder to bear the burden. This is going to be the one that will bear the burden. And he became a slave at forced labor. Here was a man that was going to do a lot of the work in the land. That was going to be the worker in the family. Number 16. Number 16. Verse number 16. Let's look at this one. Who is there? Are you Irma? Can you read that? No. How about Bonnie? Are you over? No Bonnie either. How about this young lady right here? Number 16, young lady.
Dan shall judge his people as one of the tribes of Israel.
All right. Dan shall judge his people as one of the tribes of Israel. Who was one of those great judges from that tribe? Who was he? Who was one of the great judges? Strong man. Huh? Samson. All right, Samson. Muscles. All right. All right. From that he shall judge his people as one of the tribes of Israel. Now just think about this, what he says about Dan, and then think about Samson's life. Okay? What kind of guy was Samson? He was a womanizer. He was a strong man. He was deceitful. He was a trickster.
And he was a Nazarite.
Yeah.
He was a clown. And he wasn't very smart.
He got the wrong woman, brother. You're just lucky you got the right one. And she's putting up with you, even though everybody out there thinks that you're divorced out there in the radio world.
She reminded me of that this morning when we were at church.
Young lady, we really appreciate you.
And she was looking hard, raising her eyebrows when you talk about doing all the cooking and cleaning.
We know all about that. Dan shall be a judge, judge his people as one of the tribes of Israel. And Elfrida, number 17.
Dan shall be a serpent by the way, an adder in the path, that
All
biteth
right.
the horse heels.
All right. Dan shall be a serpent in the way. He's going to be an obstacle to his enemies. What did Samson do to all of those people in that land? He was always playing dirty tricks on them, wasn't he? Boy, he did all kinds of stuff, didn't he? Remember one time he caught a bunch of foxes and tied torches to their tails and sent them out in the fields and burned the fields down. He killed a bunch of them one time with a jawbone of a donkey. He was quite a guy. Finally, there in the last of his brother Wally.
Yeah, there's a legend that says that Dan went into Europe and named all the, like Danube and Denmark, and that the Danites were into Europe. Now,
That's
I don't know if
British
that's true, but
Israelism.
They were also into the rulership of that area. That is a legend. I don't know if that's true, but you know, there might be some truth to it.
There might be some truth, but that's what we call the British Israeli theory.
Yeah,
It turns that the British Isles were actually Jews, all right, and all of that. Brother Bill.
You know, Jim, I love that story that you're talking about where he went and whipped several thousand people with the jawbone of an ass. And what I love is his audacity to say, hey, I find you worked up a sweat.
Yeah.
Give me some water so the water comes out. I just love that.
Yeah. This is quite a story about this man, Samson. And this is what it's talking about. It's looking ahead. And now, Samson gave Israel momentary, temporary salvation, didn't he? He gave them a little relief from the enemy now and then. But number 18 says, Brother Floyd.
I wait for thy salvation, O Lord.
All right. I wait for thy Yahshua. Yahshua. What does Yahshua mean? Jehovah saves. Oh Lord. I wait for the Messiah, the real Messiah. Dan, the descendant of Dan, Samson, was only temporary. But but the Messiah, the real Messiah, will be permanent. All right. Let's go to verse number 19. Verse number 19, Brother Randall.
As for Gad, raiders shall raid him, but he will raid at their heels.
All right. He shall nip at their heels. That's what it is. He shall nip at their heels. Raiders shall raid him, but he is going to be at their heels. They're not going to do one thing to him that he doesn't do back to them. He's going to be a real problem to these guys. Nipping at the heels. How do cow dogs and sheep dogs, how do they get them to move? Nipping at their heels. Nipping at their heels.
Australian healers.
Yeah. Healers. Australian healers. All right. Nip at their heels. Now number 20. Brother David Osh.
Bread from Asher shall be rich, and he shall yield royal dainties.
All right. All right, Asher shall be rich. He will have a rich land. The lowlands of Carmel, out there on the seashore. This is, and by the way, that's very fertile land today. If we wouldn't quit bombing it all the time. It would be fertile today. That's a very fertile area in there. Beautiful area. It shall be, and it will yield dainties. What's dainties? Royal dainties. I think I've seen some dainties that Alfreda cooked, hasn't she?
Mm-hmm.
My wife likes to cook dainties all the time. She wants somebody to come over to the house just so she can try out these. I said they're victims of her. She breaks all this stuff here. She makes all these little dainties, and because I don't eat it yet.
Yeah. Where does it say in the scriptures, and Asher shall dip his foot in oil? I think that is also, and it says, if they have found any oil, it was there.
Yeah, well, Asher shall dip his foot in oil. What it means that he would be in the olive press.
Oh, okay.
That all the fruit of the land, he would be in the most productive area. He would dip his foot in oil. That means that he would be out there in the olive press and in the wine press. Everything, all the dainties, he would be there. And I got to finish about Marilyn. She loves to cook these little dainties of all sorts of stuff. And of course, I don't eat that kind of food. And I remember one time we bring them up here, and she'd bring all these little dainties to the class, and she'd get to feed you. See, she didn't feed me, so she feeds all of you guys. All these little dainties. I never ate stuff like that in my life. And when we first got married, and just about 9 years ago, she'd go out and she'd order a dessert. And she said, "You've got to eat some of this with me." I said, "I don't eat dessert." I started eating that stuff and I started getting sick. And my mother would see me eat. She said, "You never ate dessert in your life. What are you doing? You're going to kill you." Boy, I was getting sick. I couldn't handle that stuff. When you haven't eaten that all your life, it tells on you. So finally I quit eating it, and she's happy because she feeds others. Because she likes to feed people.
I'll take what you do.
You'll take all the leftovers, I will. All right. Where were we?
Well, we were talking about Asher.
Asher.
And
All the rich areas. And then it says
that's a
Naphtali.
Giza Strip, isn't it?
Yeah, right in that area.
Yeah.
Naphtali is a doe let loose, and he gives beautiful words, all right? He's a swift warrior. He's got plenty of place to run, and all of this. Now, this is where Naphtali was. And then we're going to start with Joseph next week, all right? That's chapter 49 and verse 22. That's where we'll start next week. Thank you for your attention this week. I hope that you learned something from this. There's some beautiful things in here in this chapter. We're not finished with it yet, but we'll get over there and then we'll jump ahead in our book and get on going. But I could not finish the book of Genesis without showing you some of this stuff. And like I said, we could have spent a whole lot more time in it. I could have given you all the references to this and everything else. We would be there for a long, long time. Brother David, would you come up here and
Okay, on our prayer list today, Fernando would like us to pray for travel mercies for a trip that he's going on and be back tomorrow. Wally and Alfreda would like us to pray for their